Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from around the world. From Australia, India, Italy, Germany, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, UK, and Vietnam. Welcome, mabuhay, wanying daija. Welcome, everyone. We are so glad you are here with us at the Consumer Healthcare Training Academy webinar under the series of 2021 Health and Wellness Will Be Different. Today's topic is about Vital Designs, a prognosis for the healthcare industry 2025 and beyond. Before I introduce our speaker and moderators, we are encouraging everyone to think about these questions while listening. What excites you? What concerns you? What would you like to know more about? What ideas do you have? And please feel free to pop those questions, ideas, and thoughts in our chat box, and our thought leaders will answer your or some of your questions towards the end of our session. We are very honored and excited to have three thought leaders for today's webinar. Our speaker for today is Mr. Stu Lloyd. Stu is the chief hothead at Hotheads Innovation and comes from a psychology mass communication background with additional certifications in neuroscience and neuromarketing. He has worked with leading teams at companies such as Intel, Boehringer Ingelheim, Johnson & Johnson to help create patentable ideas, and worked to build the creativity, innovation, and business storytelling skills of teams at Pfizer, Bristol Myers Squibb, Danone, among others. The Telegraph newspaper in the UK called Stu the perfect storyteller. Today, we will surely find out why as he takes us through Vital Designs. Our first moderator for today is Mr. Dave McCaughan. Dave has over 30 years of rich experience in globally known advertising and communication companies, and he has led Asia-Pacific strategy planning, insights, and market researches for various famous brands. Dave is one of the most sought experts when it comes to insight and foresight of consumer behavior and brands. He has over 500 appearances globally and is a frequent writer and author for Advertising Age, Campaign Asia, Research World, and many other regional publications. Our second moderator for today is Mr. Steve Sowerby. Steve, the founder of Exponential and our co-founder of the Consumer Healthcare Academy, is a highly experienced marketer and general manager with over 30 years of corporate and agency experience. Steve has an in-depth knowledge in strategy, positioning, branding, and team building, as well as being an experienced trainer and facilitator. Steve's knowledge and experience spans globally in areas of fast-moving consumer goods, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, skincare, retailing, media, and nonprofit organizations. As a senior executive for Reckitt Benckiser and 3M Healthcare, Steve has managed divisions and run companies in Italy, Spain, France, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Thailand, Singapore, and East Asia. Steve's diverse and multicultural background has allowed him to become fluent in 7 languages and adaptable to cultural norms. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, help me please in welcoming our speaker and moderators for today, Mr. Stu Lloyd, Mr. Dave McCaughan, and Mr. Steve Sowerby.
Thank you so much, Sheila, and welcome, Stu. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And I think your song that you chose at the beginning really sets the tone, really, because I think nothing is impossible with an all-powerful mind. And when it comes to healthcare, I think nothing is more important than an all-powerful mind. Hey, Dave, how are you doing?
Very good, and looking forward to this session. You know, when Steve took us through some of the things he's going to talk about, I know you and I got really excited. There's an awful lot of stuff happening outside of COVID. And I think sometimes this year, and certainly some of the sessions that you and I have been involved in, Steve, we've got sort of focused on this year and the results of COVID, but there's a lot of longer term things that are really changing the whole healthcare wellness field. And we're going to cover a lot of those with Stu tonight. So it's going to be great. Stu,
Yeah,
do you want to
Stu.
get us started?
Yeah, I think let's rock and roll. Let's get straight into it. As you said, there is so much happening in this space. And what I've done here is really pull together a meta kind of aggregation, if you like, of what's coming down the track 3 to 5 years away. So there's not too much blue sky stuff. I'd rather focus in giving everybody that's tuned in today some realistic, actionable things that they can say, hey, that's cool, that's happening. How can we jump in on that? What are the implications of that? What are the challenges in that? Where are the opportunities? And let's really move forward. Because the amazing thing, according to Deloitte, is that spending on healthcare is going to explode to $14 trillion by 2022. So it's a big industry, there's big opportunities, and I'm really, really excited to be here this evening. And thanks for the invitation to present this. Let's get into it.
Yeah, fantastic.
Now, as I said, it's a fast changing thing, and COVID's had a massive 10x effect on this whole industry. You're looking at Greg Hunt here, and Greg is the Federal Minister for Health in Australia. And he said just literally 2 days ago, telemedicine was supposed to be a 10-year transformation. We turned it around in 10 days. And I think that really sets the tone for where the industry is going. The opportunities and the speed of thought and the speed of action with which we're now newly attacking this. Now, what's my experience? Sheila, by the way, I think I should hire you as my PR agent. I love your intro, talked me up beautifully. However, I should perhaps tailor your expectations. See, my father was actually a geneticist, and my uncle was a professor of microbiology. So when I came to the end of high school, and my father was looking at all the subjects that I was going to do for the higher school certificate at the end of school, he said, where's your science? He said, gee, he said, you should have biology in there. I said, why? He said, it's easy, Marks. It's 50% common sense. I said, really, Dad? He said, yeah, 50% common sense. Do it. So I did it. And I'm proud to announce I scored 28% for biology. However,
well done. Well done. So you became a psychologist instead, Sue. Excellent.
However, I've made up for it in the last 30 years with lots of real life practice at the forefront of the industry and cross-sectorally, etc. But more recently, I want to share with you an example, I guess, which was to me a real deep dive immersion into the healthcare industry. And this really opened my eyes to a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight. So this photo here, this is me 5 years ago. Fit, strong, healthy, world at my feet, feeling fantastic about life. And so much so that I thought that's a really good time to go for a health checkup. Nothing could be possibly wrong. I'm hitting the gym every day. I'm eating perfectly, all good. Boom. This was me 4 weeks later. Oh, really? What happened? Well, I'd gone in for a full head-to-toe checkup, and all the things I was worried about, a man of my age, prostates and cholesterols and all that, all checked out fine. But there was a little something that they found. When I say a little something, it was a stomach tumor, a GIST tumor to be exact, the size of this Rubik's Cube sitting on my stomach. So into hospital I go. 6-hour operation, followed by 12 days of recuperation to think about it. What got me here? And I was ruminating a lot about the meaning of life as beautiful morphine swirled around my brain. But the main thing that struck me, don't get me wrong, I was in very good hands. I had 2 professors looking after me, one as the surgeon, one as an oncologist. But the environment in the hospital struck me as all completely wrong. It was not a healing environment. There were doors slamming all night as staff went in and out of the dispensary. outside of my ward, for example.
Mm.
I couldn't actually get a good night's sleep, and surely that's a basic prerequisite for healing, is good amounts of rest. The food, lots of fried stuff coming around on the trolleys. I couldn't eat any of it, of course. I'd lost 50% of my stomach. I was just on basically saline drip for a week, followed by chocolate milkshakes. Way. But the food was not feeding into better nutrition or better health outcomes for anybody. Anyway, I came out of there, got back to real life, and took it upon myself to say, well, how can I improve my life, and what might have caused me to get into that situation in the first place? So I looked at ways of reducing my stress, getting into more meditation, for example. I moved away from a big, busy city into the mountains of Chiang Mai in northern Thailand, just to bring the stress down. I met and married my soulmate. All good things happened. And after that, we had 3 years of record business, of training and consulting. That was all fantastic. In the meantime, I was on for that 3 years, what we would call a pseudo chemo treatment, if you like. And at the end of the 3 years, of course, there were quarterly checkups. I went along, and it was a formality because all along the way, everything had been checking out fine. All the scans were clear. I went for the final one just to get the sign off, and yes, you're good to go. Carry on, Mr. Lloyd. I checked the scan. He said, that's great, Stu. There's nothing to see. There's nothing in your lymph. There's nothing in your stomach. That's all good, buddy. You're clear. I said, woohoo, good to go. It was a great celebratory moment. Well, for about 3 seconds, because then Professor Beale said, we'll just scroll up to the lungs and just have a quick look. Oh, bang. I had 3 seconds to rejoice of being cancer-free, and I was back into another battle. This was a completely unrelated cancer, and this turned out to be a rather nasty stage 4B melanoma, which had found its way into my lung. So lung operation, followed by a year of immunotherapy treatment, which is the latest, greatest stuff. And I'm pleased to say I just finished that 3 months ago, all clear, etc., etc.
Brilliant.
But the interesting thing here, once again, the learning for me is nobody seemed particularly interested in me as a whole person. I was a patient. I was the recipient of this wonder drug in each case. Here's the pill that fixes everything. Here's the infusion that fixes everything. And I kept on thinking, well, surely there's stuff I can do nutritionally, in terms of diet, exercise, sleep, just greater life, me as a whole person. And those questions were not answered and perhaps remain unanswered. And so this is really fed into a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yeah.
But, a friend of mine in insurance ran the mathematics and worked out that me getting both of those cancers and surviving both of those cancers worked out to be a 15 in a million chance. So I'm very, very excited to be here tonight, well, at all really,
Yeah.
and to share with you how these really feed into where the healthcare industry is going. And
Yeah.
I've sort of embarked on my life's work of this thing which I've created a pro bono group, which is called Creatives Against Cancer, to help people find answers and to spread the word, especially against detection. And the message I can give to everybody, please, is #GetChecked.
Yeah. Yeah. Stu, if I could just jump in, I just want to, I know that we've got a lot to get through, but I just wanted to say that's just a brilliant example of something which we forget in the healthcare industry, which is that the best, the most powerful medicine, the best medicine is not the pill, it's not the surgery, it is the patient themselves, the individual, who is informed, who is empowered, and who is, most importantly, inspired. And they can then take more care of themselves and ask the right questions and make the right changes. And sometimes in the industry, we forget that our role is not just to produce a pill, but our role is to really help that person to return to health, whatever that health might be. And that's an important and salient point. So thank you so much for raising that.
You're welcome. Great. So, as promised, what I've done is looked at what are the innovations coming down the track in the 3 to 5 year window. Anything sort of longer than that, I've left out. And what I've done is given us the lens of what I call my 6 Ps of innovation. And just to clue you in to what those are. So you've got products, you've got processes, you've got premises, you've got promotion, which is marketing and broader issues. You've got the people in the industry, and you've got the purpose, the reason we jump out of bed in the morning to do this work. And so I'm just going to break them down by each of those. And what we'll do in each case is flag 3 key drivers, things that are happening here and now, interestingly, in that space, and just single one of those out for a quick chat. So that's what we're looking at. So let's get into the first one, which is product. So as Steve said, it's not all about the pill. Now, here what we're going to be talking about is nanomedicine, digiceuticals, and precision medicine. Actually, all of these three things feed into precision medicine. It's all about moving away from the shotgun blast and much more towards a personalized, as much as possible, rifle shot. But here's the kicker. According to Cipher Medicine, 65% of patients prescribed top 5 selling drugs in the world did not respond to treatment. That's a hell of a number. So with nanomedicines, for example, you know, these are possibly therapeutic and possibly diagnostic as we move into them. But looking at how can we carry these deep into the cells of the body in a very, very, very specific way. To give you an idea, I mean, if you don't know what a nano is, a nanometer, a sheet of newspaper is 100,000 nanometers thick. So nanomedicine is really drilling down to a very, very, very small level and carrying those into specific targeted cells as best as we can. So this is very exciting. Digiceuticals feed into what Steve was saying there about the fact that we can give somebody the tablet, but in return, that tablet can help us to be a more savvy consumer because it's giving us real-time feedback. So that's an interesting development. But then also it feeds into this whole thing of the fact that it's all precision medicine. It's helping us to understand that patient much better and then feed into the broader body of knowledge. So precision medicines overall are probably the most transformative trend that we're going to be seeing along the next 3 to 5 years. So as I mentioned, something like the immunotherapy, my oncologist, Professor Alex Menzies, has said this is probably the biggest medical breakthrough since penicillin. So that's a huge call. That's a really huge call. And as we go along, tailoring those, you know, it started off with specific cancers. Now they're rolling those out to broader cancers. And as we go along, obviously, they're going to try and find other Achilles heels and back doors, which they can attack other diseases with. A little caveat here, 80% of the data we're getting at the moment, 80% of the subjects is Caucasian. So it's causing blind spots, obviously, in terms of genomics. You know, different ethnicities will have different genetic makeups. So that's something we need to flag. We need to balance it up so globally people are addressed. Okay, and the other thing under products is this whole thing of materials. And Toray, which is a Japanese company, the CTO, this says, the root of all disruption, constructive destruction, will be materials. So there'll be things like wearable undershirts, for example, which can just monitor your biometrics. And there might be an algorithm there which picks up something like an early sign of Parkinson's or a stroke or something like that and flag that. So this is exciting stuff. Dave, Steve, you want to jump in perhaps?
Yeah, I was going to say, just on that, I just read in one of the Nicholas Hall reports recently that smartwatches have been registered for picking up arrhythmias now in the US. So I forget, I think it was Fitbit that has just got a license to basically be effectively one of the instruments that you can use for identifying arrhythmia. So it's in many ways it's already here, but we're now going through a regulatory process to just give it, give it authority that we can take the results seriously. So definitely, yeah.
And
Dave,
Apple
what's your thought?
I know. I think this is really interesting. I mean, I'm just reminded when Stu talked about materials that the US Army a few years ago was doing testing with undershirts, so underwear, that basically could tell by the sweat that you were releasing into the underwear what medications you were on, whether you'd touched alcohol in the previous 48 hours, those sorts of things. And it was doing it actually for sensible sorts of reasons. It was doing things like tank drivers and stuff like that. So to make sure that they were checking what they were. But that technology has moved, moving on so fast that, simple sweatbands around our wrists, things like that, very soon are coming on or starting to come on the market. Underwear that's coming onto the market that allows you to check so many different things. And I think this whole idea of, the individualization through precision measurement, if you like, on an ongoing basis is just going to make such a difference. But, it's something Steve mentioned earlier on, of course, is when you talk about the genetics and things like that, is a lot of these things at the moment are being tested in developed, let's call it the developed West, or maybe Japan. And we've got to take on board the great bulk of the world. And I know there's a number of people watching this now, having looked at the attendees that come from, not from the developed West. And so all of these things have got to reach down, and we've got to find ways to reach it down to the 6.9 billion people that are not affluent, that sort of thing. So,
okay, cool.
It's really interesting.
Good, thank you.
Cool, let's move
Alrighty.
on.
Let's move into the next one, which is the next P, which is process. So under process, really, the guiding thought here is that 70% of medical errors currently are attributable to communication breakdowns. So how do we get smarter at that?
Yeah.
And joining all of these things together, the Internet of Medical Things, big data interoperability, there I said it properly, and clinical mobility, all joined together basically for a better real-time understanding and communication. So predictive analytics. So there's lots of these kind of words which come into play. Basically, predictive analytics sucks up all the data, and if all this data is massed and pooled and aggregated and available in real time, then we're really able to get a much better, bigger, clearer picture of who it is in front of us and what's their story, what's their issue, what's going on here. But certainly in process, predictive analytics are going to be increasing efficiencies, response efficiencies, real-time reportings, identifying things like at-risk populations, and just feeding into the machine, as it were, and continually learning and continually getting smarter. Larger data sets, of course, then result in greater accuracy, but overall, wow, it's going to be a very, very complex ecosystem, and the fact that, of course, privacy laws, etc., becomes a big issue in this whole thing. But let's zero into clinical mobility. So basically, the lack of real-time patient health at the bedside at the moment is the biggest obstacle. Yeah. Somebody's patient record might exist in great detail, but it's absolutely no good if it's sitting in a paper folder in a GP's office across town or across the world. So what we're seeing now is a massive move. In fact, Zebra did a really great study on this, where nurse at the bedside, physicians, pharmacists are pretty much in the next 2 to 3 years going to move up to 98, 99, 100% usage of digital mobile devices at the bedside. So hopefully all of that will be on tap in real time at the bedside. That's a really important one. And another part of this is, I guess, what we call real-time locational services. You know, as you've got massive workforces moving around a hospital, who's where, you know, where's that sample, where's that specimen, where's that defibrillator, et cetera, and we're able to work those all out and ping people and say, hey, you need to be in ward 7 now, and bring that defibrillator, and hey lab, how are we doing with that specimen, et cetera, bringing it all to the bedside at the right time, in the right place, for the right purpose.
Yeah.
So that's
and building on that, I think, Stu, it's perhaps not just the bedside, but the GP clinic and the other points of care, which can be the pharmacy, which could be, you know, a care home, which could be at home, or could be telemedicine. So really getting that clinical mobility at where it's needed, when it's needed, is amazing. The technology is already available. The data is already available, but it might be in a million different places. But bringing that together, and so giving access to the healthcare practitioner or even the individual to be able to answer questions and then make a decision using that data, will be a very powerful tool, and it will be a major step forward.
Big steps forward. Yeah.
Yep. So this actually says a lot. This has been on Koslow, who was the founder of Sun Data Systems, who says, in the next 10 years, data science and software will do more for medicine than all of the biological sciences together. Now, that was very controversial when he said it. And to put that in context, he actually said it 7 years ago. So folks, we've only got 3 years to go for this to play out. And I think it's playing out exactly as he predicted. Yeah. Okay. So moving on from process, let's move on to the next one, which is premises. So what's premises? That's obviously anything which is real estate related. And there are huge changes afoot here. Now, the thing is that we all know a hospital's been around and really haven't changed in the way that they give care in the last 50 years, to be honest. This is changing very quickly. So decentralization, distribution, specialized outpatient centers. They might be just standalone emergency centers. They might be urgent care clinics. They might be retail clinics. Even Walmart has come into the space, and you know, they've got Walmart health center malls, basically, where you can have primary care, you can get a vision test, you can get blood tests, dental x-rays, et cetera. You can get an annual physical done for $30. So this is kind of scary that it's being Walmartized. Yeah. New look hospitals. The problem here is that hospitals are tending to think of themselves as real estate plays. They are so invested in the hospital itself, and patients and specialists don't need to be geographically proximate anymore because of telemedicine. All right. And the problem is that between 1/3 and 2/3 of the cost of treating a patient in hospital goes towards the overhead of the hospital building itself, not towards better care for the patient. So, you know, I think there's a bit of a wake-up call there, and that's been fast forwarded by COVID with the hospital at home concept. So what's hospital at home? This is exciting. It's basically, well, if you don't need all of that infrastructure, all of the toys and the tools and the gadgets, if you're not critically ill, but just need to recuperate, hey, why don't we send the hospital to you? Yeah. And there are some really good companies, one which is called Dispatch Medical in the US, for example, and within an hour, they can get a medium complexity lab to your home, plus paramedics, plus nurses, et cetera. They've got doctors on call from the Mayo Clinic who can do the rounds of the patient virtually. And this is exciting. What they're finding already is 25% cost savings by doing this. Readmissions are reduced 25%, and mortalities down by 20%.
Amazing.
That's a really big difference, especially if you're that patient. Yeah.
This concept of taking it to people. And again, I guess it's one of those things that obviously this year has sped up in a lot of ways because circumstances have changed things. I just know that when I look at, you know, marketplaces like India, Bangladesh, etc., you know, not on the scale that they might be doing in the US, Dispatch Health is doing it. But the idea of not just telemedicine, but of actually being able to get things to people rather than them having to get to a place is making such a huge difference, and will continue to make a huge difference. You know, we talk about the one of the big three things that's come out of COVID is the come to you economy has just massively ballooned, right? Well, we think about that in terms of food deliveries, and sometimes we might think of it as medicine deliveries if we happen to live in the right cities. But actually, the come to you economy is actually about the health industry coming to the individual rather than the individual going to the industry. And I think that speeding up that we've seen, to go back to the previous quote, you know, what we thought was going to take 10 years, and we might be sitting there going, yeah, really? Yeah, but it is happening, right? So yeah. I can see, since you introduced me to the idea of Dispatch Health, the company, I did some reading about it, and I think the things they're doing and looking at the way other people are copying or you know, taking their pathway is really exciting, really exciting.
Yeah, I haven't heard of the term "come to you economy." There's so many descriptions for the economy that we're in, and now we've got another one. That's a new one for me, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, it's happening already in terms of pharmacy. E-pharmacy is just exploding in many markets, especially as Dave, you said, in some of the developing markets, India, Bangladesh, are really, it's a way that you can get medicine to those people who need it in a very efficient way. So absolutely, it's there, it's starting. I think regulations are taking a long time to catch up, but the concept is very clear. And as soon as the regulations are able to open up to dispensing medicines online, to sending prescription medicine to a patient via a Grab or a delivery service or a zip line or whatever is the appropriate transport. When that regulation opens up, I can see really an absolute deluge of opportunities in this particular area. Yeah, off you go to the next. Yeah.
Definitely, the regulators need to be moving at the same speed as everybody else. I think speed is a new competitive weapon, and there is obviously an increased urgency in the world now, and it's really opened eyes of people to the fact, we need to move quickly, move fast and break things is the old adage. Mm-hmm. But we're going to be talking about, I think you mentioned Zip there. We'll talk about those in a little later. The great thing is, as you see, as we step through these 6 lenses, they all actually feed and bleed into each other, pardon the pun. There is a lot of overlap because as one piece of the puzzle gets unlocked, whether it's a regulatory puzzle or a bit of digital technology, that then springs forth a multitude of new possibilities. So this is really exciting. So we come now to promotion. And promotion, as I said, is marketing sort of in its broadest kind of sense. And wow, stand by for some massive, massive, massive disruptive hits in the next 3 to 5 years as huge players, particularly huge tech players, come into the market. So Accenture had a study which showed that the annual startup funding for digital healthcare companies reached $6.5 billion last year. Wow. And of course, all the big 4 tech companies, but plus lots of like 2 people in a garage startups, they're all flooding into this marketplace. So it promises to be very, very exciting. What it's going to result in is this: strategically segmented customer experiences. So this speaks once again to the fact that we're looking at rifle shots, not shotgun blasts. That's a recurring theme that you can take out of this session. So just getting insights, database insights generally, because the future of healthcare is digital. That's very, very clear. And what's interesting is that most people in one of the big studies I looked at agreed that the technology was not going to be a stumbling block. So there's this inherent belief that technology can solve everything, but can the regulators come along with us on the ride in time? And can the whole ecosystem shift along with this, but everybody has full belief that the technology can deliver what we need it to deliver. So I say extracting insights, and once again, insights can be monetized, and we can take that data and deliver value-based care, which will be once again another recurring takeout from this evening. Insurance companies. Now, I mention insurance companies because they will be a major player in the role of education. There's already a transformation moving from cure-based to prevention-based, and insurance company have got a lot of skin in the game in terms of making sure that happens, obviously, because happier, healthier populations mean less payouts. So they'll be leading the charge there. And, if you, I attended
you just got to look at, Stu, you just got to look at the way the insurance companies have positioned themselves. So, 5 years ago, I was working on the advertising for one of the world's biggest insurance companies, health insurance companies across Asia. And what was interesting even then, and then the next year, AIA started to do it. They now position themselves as wellness companies. And I know wellness is a word that over the last 5-6 years gets floated around a lot, but these are companies that have really figured out they're much better focused at promoting wellness than just saying we'll cover you when you die, because obviously it works for the longer term.
That becomes expensive.
So it's interesting the way in which they've changed the services that they're actually offering. Not just a little bit, it started off with a little bit of website advice or here's a tip on what you should eat. But now it's really into lifestyle. These insurance companies are really offering lifestyle solutions and packaging up for individuals.
Yeah, it's a reorientation. As I say, Zia Ziman, who is, I think, CTO at MetLife, I saw him talking at a innovation conference quite recently, and he said MetLife is not an insurance company, we're a data company. So there is that reorientation of insights and understanding. And then, as you say, feeding into shaping better lives and better outcomes. But, AIA, you mentioned, their slogan, for example, healthier, longer, better lives. GSK, somebody pointed out, is very similar. Do more, feel better, live longer. So we're all messing with the same languaging around the same, around the same thing. But the thing I wanted to really focus on here is new entrant competitors. As I said, stand by, fasten your seatbelt, because big players coming in, your Googles, your Amazons, your Apples, your Microsofts are already in the space. They're deeply in the space, but let me just give you an idea of how much in the space they are, and you may not realize. Google Ventures basically puts about a third of the money that they get from the parent company Alphabet towards healthcare. All right, and has backed already 60 health-related enterprises. So that's Google already, and making big strides into AI. I'm not going to talk about AI tonight, by the way, because the World Economic Forum believes that it's going to be at least sort of 10 years, let's say 2030, before AI is really living up to its full potential. It's already there, it's doing stuff, but it's not really impacting. So we're just going to gloss over that for this evening. But so that's what Google's doing. But if we look at what the other guys are up to, it's just massive. Google in data, Apple in consumer devices, and Apple Watch, once again, similar to what you were saying before, Steve. Apple Watch is going to be, it's not about telling the time. It's about reading everything about you and feeding that back in and saying, hey, this guy, he's out for a morning walk, but that pattern tells us he's about to have a stroke. Let's send an ambulance. And in maybe 5 years' time, a self-driving ambulance will just suddenly turn up and say, hop in, sir. find its way to the best remote center to take care of you, et cetera, et cetera. This is the exciting stuff. Amazon is in there as well as the retail part of it. They are really disrupting that whole pharmaceutical supply chain. And already we've seen the hospitals are making 30% less from drug sales. So you could call that the Amazon effect already in place. And then Microsoft just really wants to position itself as the trusted leader in the overall healthcare IT sector. So that's what we're looking at there. And, you know, this is probably something which is quite scary, is that Sean Parker, now he was one of the founders of Spotify. He also, I think, came out of one of the other big tech companies before Spotify. He's now set up the Parker Institute for Cancer Immunotherapy, and they have partnerships with, I mean, really serious players like Stanford University, for example. And he's all about just saying, hey, here's an industry we can turn upside down because these guys have had it too good for too long. So this is the mindset that we're up against. It's the startup upstart mindset, bringing speed to the table, because one of the things that the Parker Institute's put in place is that all of their partners will accept the review board approvals from their other partners, which will then speed up trials. So we're talking months instead of years. So this is an exciting playing field.
Yeah, I think it's it also sort of underlines the importance of collaboration across industries and across companies, because I think if we all try to do it ourselves, do that sort of not invented here syndrome, we're not going to be interested in anything we can't manufacture, we can't develop, we can't sell, then I'm afraid, the industry is going to go through a very, very rough time. I think one way we can speed things up is, instead of trying to do everything yourself, think about who could do it better than you and get into bed with them and work together in a collaboration. Then we can start to make changes which are, very, very fast.
Great point. I think the collaboration, co-opetition, et cetera, all of these things are really big words moving forward. And as you say,
it's
not
interesting.
all
I just noticed.
Sorry, carry on.
Sorry, Stu, I was just going to say, it's interesting because in some work I'm doing for a couple of other projects, including one I'm doing some stuff with Steve on, what I'm noticing is that the 2020 word is alliances. It's not collaboration, it's alliances. And the reason for that is because collaboration is becoming a sort of word that implies, well, we'll do it together until I can figure out a way to steal the idea. Whereas alliances actually means we all have the same amount of skin in the game. And I'm just noticing a lot of things, Walmart, for example, we don't think of them in that sense, but they've got a whole program about medicine and, food as medicine that they started about 2 years ago, which was alliances with a number of big public health institutions to really refocus things about diet, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Of course, this year, they'd then be able to ratchet that up. And what happens is, because in the United States, at least, Walmart becomes a massive vehicle for in-store and online promulgating what the alliances are doing. So if they put together different health institutions and they're saying, look, you should be doing this about your eating, your health, etc., Walmart has the reach to reach, 150, whatever it is, 200 million Americans that buy stuff at Walmart every week and actually inform these things. So it becomes a different, as you said, different people that we wouldn't have thought of really getting into this sort of game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And once you've got something like a Walmart into it, as you say, you really just taking it to a whole new distribution network, a whole new level, whole new affordability paradigms, et cetera. So huge seismic shifts really afoot. And I think the point must be made. A lot of this stuff is already here.
Yes.
We may not be feeling the full effect of it here, but it's already here, and it's going to lead to a lot of other Me Too kind of operators jumping in as well, falling on their coattails.
Yeah.
So the traditional custodians of the industry are under massive attack. Let's move now to people. So healthcare really is about people on two levels. It's the patients, but it's also the providers. And there's lots of things shifting here. Now, interestingly here, is that 34%, and this is American research, 34% of people are currently tracking or managing their health with some kind of mobile app or gizmo. It might be a wrist thing or a Fitbit or wearable of sorts. And 95% of those people are happy to share that data with a healthcare provider. And the funny thing is, you know, we're now getting a situation where the patient almost knows more about themselves than the healthcare professional, because they are going in with the data. They're also going in, interestingly enough, with questions. 34% of people are fronting up with questions based on their understanding of it. So a lot of forearmed, forewarned, et cetera, which sort of gets to the thing, the old adage of, you know, never Google your symptom, right? You don't want to do that. But the thing is, people are becoming more savvy, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But the key thing here is that people generally are living longer and living older, which throws up a whole bunch of new challenges, ailments, and opportunities. All right, so I saw some Australian research the other day, which shows that the average Australian is enduring 11 years of ill health in a lifetime now. That's a lot of ill health. I mean, my dear old mother, who's now 84, you know, has an emphysema condition, she has a dementia condition, et cetera. The quality of life is not there, but she is being kept alive as best as possible. Medications are keeping her alive. So there's all sorts of interesting things which come along that, but populations around the world generally are getting older very, very quickly. So there's a massive opportunity and a massive challenge which goes with that. More savvy patients, yeah, we've touched on that. So people are no longer passive, going along and just regarding the doctor as the experts. They're going in there with a bit of info as well. They're forearmed, there's more self-diagnosis, there's more self-care coming into it. Patient empowerment is the buzzword there. But what I really want to talk about here is the last one, which is not about the patient or the consumer, as we're tending now to need to start calling them. This is about the providers, the staff. Widening demand, supply gap. We're running particularly short as the world gets older of physicians and nurses. So some research I saw in Australia the other day shows that within 10 years, Australia is going to be 123,000 nurses short for the job to do. So we need to have smarter solutions for that kind of patient care. And the other thing too, as the industry digitalizes, then you get this sort of conflict between the fact that, you know, nurses, let's talk about nurses in particular, high on empathy and soft skills, that's not enough anymore. Now they need to have digital skills as well, so that they can be operating all the tools and the toys to bring this whole big data thing to the bedside with them. So that's a bit of a crunch time.
I'm reminded, Stu, of two things about nurses. First is, a very good friend of mine in Japan is considered.
I was wondering where the story was going, Dave, with the nurses.
Yeah, well, a good friend of mine in Japan who's a guy named Jesper Cole. He's considered the #1 foreign economist in Japan, and Jesper has been promulgating for the last 5 or 6 years that the luckiest people on the planet are 18 to 20-year-old Japanese, and the reason for that is because it's the oldest country in the world, and there will be for the whole of their lifetime a huge demand for digitally savvy, empathetic people to go into the nursing business. And he's actually been promulgating the fact that, you know, if you're a smart kid, become a nurse, because the future, you'll never be out of a job. The other thing that comes up with that, of course, is, and we talked about this, I think, the other day, was that if you think about that shortage, and you mentioned Australia, and I've just literally gone through the quarantine process of coming to Sydney, you know, from my home in Bangkok. And I mentioned to you that all the nurses that were involved in our checking at the different points in the 2 weeks of quarantine were mostly from Ireland or the UK in general. And when I asked one of them, they just said, oh yeah, everybody involved in this, all the nurses that are doing this in Sydney we've all come out from Ireland and the UK because, well, the money's better here, you know, and we don't have to work as hard and the lifestyle's great, which is fantastic. But then that leads to, as we were talking about the other day, this idea of health migration or, you know, health industry migration of, well, then who's servicing in Ireland and in England?
I think just, you know, how to access healthcare across borders now is technically very, very possible. You could be having a telemedicine confrontation with a doctor in the UK, whereas you're based here in Thailand. But still, I also wanted to raise one point in terms of that care of nurses. I mean, something here in Thailand that we have is that family is so involved in care of inpatients in hospitals. As soon as you're on a ward, the family stays with you and takes care of your basic needs, and the nurses are there for the more technological input, and you know, there's whatever is a more professional qualified care, and so that reduces the demand and gets the family involved. So I think, what does that mean for us as an industry? I think that increasingly we need to be looking at family as also healthcare providers at home, and how on certain areas that when we are engaging with patients, let's also engage with family members so that we can improve the care at home by giving family members the right information, the right empowerment, and the right inspiration.
Yeah, exactly, Steve. And it's one of the things which came out with the hospital at home example, for example, is pets. Having your pets around, your cat, your dog, you know, whatever your pet is, the healing factor of that is, I believe, very well documented. And, and the suppliers can really see how you eat at home, how you interact at home, how you are at home. And that in turn can add to more sort of data feedback. So it's a very, very rich, holistic approach to things, which feeds very nicely into our last of the 6 Ps. We've made it through.
There we go.
We've made it through the 6 now. So we come to purpose, and this ties in very nicely with what you were saying also, Dave, about Bangladesh and more remote areas around the world. So purpose. Why do we get out of bed? What's the point of all this endeavor? I mean, this massive $14 trillion industry, or the $500 billion pharmaceutical industry. What's the point of it? So that's what purpose really examines. And a lot of it's now coming down to people being driven by closing the socio-economic gaps. So here's this thing. Can we bring advanced eye care or diagnosis to the deepest parts of rural Bangladesh or Africa, et cetera, et cetera? And, you know, there's the poster child for all of this was a lady called Jane Chen, who was a Stanford grad who developed a thing called the Embrace Incubator a few years ago, you know, where she reduced the sort of cost of an incubator from $25,000 to $25 using phase shifting materials, and something that anybody with access to boiling water could now keep their baby warm for 4 or 5 hours at a go.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, just bringing all of these things together. And another exciting one here is Butterfly IQ. So there's a guy called Jonathan Rothberg, a Yale genetics researcher. And basically he has developed ultrasound technology, which is $2,000 versus the $100,000 machine that you're going to get in a big modern hospital. And what he's doing with this is quite incredible, because they're selling it to 150 countries around the world who can afford it, but they're using the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to provide to 53 other countries around the world that can't afford it. So, you know, you're really bringing first-class diagnostic healthcare to the whole world for the first time. And, you know, you can have access to, one example, for example, was an eye doctor in, I think, St. Guy's in London, and who was reading retina scans taken on an iPhone somewhere in the middle of Africa, you know. So it's a wonderful purpose-driven story of just closing that gap. which ties in with accessibility and democratizing. And the picture that you've got here is Zipline. So Zipline operates these drones doing blood deliveries, drug deliveries, etc. And they're very active in Rwanda, in deepest, darkest Africa of all places. And they literally fly these drones dozens of kilometers into the jungles and the mountains and use the little village as a drop zone, and boom, away comes your urgent supply. And just
That's
doing
amazing.
amazing work there. And there's a lot of experimentation going on around drones in between different hospital buildings, between various facilities. So that's all exciting. What I want to focus on here is the big seismic shift from cure to prevention. Yeah, exactly. I got it right. And you know, what's exciting about that is that from cure to prevention to diagnosis, early intervention, the earlier that we can get in or even prevent it is a massive, massive, massive saving on trying to fix something down the line once it's got out of hand. Problem with the model is that doctors currently are only remunerated when we're sick. So the big what if here is, what if doctors were rewarded for keeping us healthy? That's a huge what if. But you know, I think it's a broken model in a sense that doctors only make money when we get sick. Because chronic disease at the moment is representing 80% of all healthcare spend, and chronic disease is something which is 24/7, yet access to help on that is not 24/7. I mean, if you want to book an airline ticket, you can do it around the clock. If you want to do your banking, e-banking, you can do it online around the clock. If you want to shop on Amazon or Alibaba, you can do it around the clock. Healthcare is not around the clock at the moment in terms of access, services, facilities, expertise, etc., etc. So I'm going to finish with this one, which is Jeroen Tas from Philips, who says the present healthcare system is essentially a sick care system built in the middle of the last century. So that's a little hand grenade, which I'm going to toss into the room. And because I think, you know, we need to make that flip, and that speaks of everything that we need to do in terms of moving from cure to prevention.
Yeah. And if I could throw another hand grenade in there, is that you can easily translate that to say that the present healthcare companies that we have are again essentially sick care companies, because we only make money when we sell the product, the pill. So imagine that we can create the opportunity to keep people from getting sick. It's a complete shift of the business model, but it's something that is already moving in that direction. And I think as an industry, there are things that we can do to actually speed that transition. Very good. Okay. Yeah. I think we're getting towards the end of the hour, Stu. Dave, any thoughts on the last of these slides?
No, I think it's been excellent. You know, it's an excellent quick summary. And I know, Stu, you could talk for every single point that you've raised. I will say to just this last point, you know, I've been heavily involved with a couple of global wellness organizations for the wellness industry. And it's been interesting how over the last 15 years, that industry has gone from really weird stuff on the outskirts, sort of semi-hippie and things like that, right? To more and more, it's big mainstream companies trying to get involved in that wellness business. Recognition that it's exactly what you're talking about. It's about their companies want to make money, right? But it's all about, you know, how do you actually find ways to help people have better lives, live better lives, offer solutions in terms of lifestyle, health, etc. Not cure things, but actually get beyond that, right? Yeah. And I think, interestingly, though, a lot of those models are coming from companies you wouldn't expect. They're not coming from the traditional pharma companies, etc. They are coming literally from things like hotel chains, insurance companies, as you mentioned, etc. And so I think that change will just speed up more and more in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on, because I think the thing that horrifies me in all of this, Dave, is that nowhere in these readings, and I say this has been a real mega and meta kind of aggregation, nowhere in there is there pulling in things like cannabis, for example, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedics, the amazing work which has been done with LSD and psilocybin at the moment. All of these things, which, as you say, are seen a little bit as woo-woo, yet are being scientifically proven to be doing some amazing things. But there's this huge built-in divide in the industry. And there's healthcare on one hand, there's wellness on the other. And we are not talking to each other, not nearly enough.
Not nearly enough.
But surely the real answer lies in there somewhere. I think that's the magic button that needs to be unlocked. Yeah.
And you haven't even mentioned probably one of the biggest and important elements, which is mental health. You know, the role of mental health in health is completely underestimated at this point in time. We treat the body parts, as you have on your chart there. We don't actually treat the whole person physiologically and psychologically. And if that comes, I think there is huge benefits,
Yeah, you know, if we're going to look out to 2030 and perhaps a bit longer than that, three things. Mental health, definitely. And I think COVID has exacerbated that. That's really brought it into the spotlight. Mental health. The other one is obesity. I think the world is on a cusp of a Netflix-induced obesity epidemic as we lie on our couches and binge watch Netflix. It's already a big thing and slated to double in the US in terms of US heart rate disease, expected to double in the next 20 years. So that's massive. And the other one is lung disease. According to the World Health Organization, 90% of the world is living in dirty air on a daily basis. Completely unacceptable. And that is going to absolutely come back and bite us badly.
Very good. So, definitely.
Obesity and the lung disease. So as you can see, just to wrap up with this nice little chart here, is everything along the bottom needs to be slid more towards the top. That's the direction of the movement in these various matrices here. And some of those are more advanced than others, but definitely the industry needs to move up towards the top of the chart. Now, how do we do that? Well, it takes a lot of thinking and brain power. Holistic and interdisciplinary, I just made the point there. We need to have these conversations, collaborations, alliances, smash the silos down, break the borders, break the barriers. We need to be more led by design principles, according to Zaina Kayat. And how do we do that? Well, here's some good news. Just before we all sign off, in the follow-up to this, you'll get a link with the recording of tonight's session to refer back to, but I've also made available a free copy of my ebook, which is Killer Questions, which is all about challenging the status quo. How do we ask those great, big, juicy, hairy, what-if questions? The secret is all revealed in my 9-step innovation question formulation. So you'll get the canvas, you'll get the book, that's all free and compliments of the our workshop here tonight. So that's it.
No, that's brilliant, Stu. Can I say a big thank you on behalf of everyone? I think that book is also very stimulating in terms of asking the questions of ourselves, and it's very generous of you to be able to share it with the whole of the audience. So that's really amazing. So thank you so much. Right, we're 5 minutes over. Sheila, do we have time for a question?
We can probably have one, Dave.
Okay.
Steve, if okay with you.
Yes, absolutely. Let's go for one question. But of course, all the other questions we'll answer after and send them out to all the participants. But let's go with one question.
Yes. How do people handle data security? Countries will not give the data of their sick and put it in a common server. This is what the one who sent the question found when working in this concept in the GCC, even across Emirates and hospitals.
How do we handle data security when it comes to sharing all our healthcare information? Stu, any ideas?
Let me flag it by saying it's not my area, it's not my expertise. My thought on it is the fact that, yes, that will be a stumbling block. People, data privacy is already a sore point in this world of cybercrime and identity theft, et cetera. Added to that it's your very, very personal data, which is being fed up to the cloud. This makes people very, very touchy. We need to have a greater level of confidence across the board that our information has been completely disaggregated and disembodied and turned it into zeros and ones without a name against it. But that will be a major stumbling block towards this whole thing of the big data interoperability and the learning that we can get, global learning in terms of, what are the lifestyle, genetic, genomic, environmental factors which predispose us.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer, but I understand the problem.
Yeah. Well, there's obviously some of the genotyping companies. So now, certainly coming out of the States, some of these companies are collecting data and are obviously using that data for reports. So there is already things in there that I'm sure that we can learn from in terms of the way that kind of the most personal level of data is being handled. Dave?
And we don't have time to go on about it, but have a look at what's happening in Korea and Japan, where a lot of health authorities in Korea, for example, a lot of hospitals have got together. They are sharing data. It's disengaged from the individual, so you can't identify the individual's name, but it's giving them huge bases of shared data to look at how procedures have worked, how different types of medicine have worked against different people with similar, reactions, etc. And all that is coming together to create a much bigger model for allowing different levels of authorities in different hospitals or individual doctors, individual nurses to actually check what other people are doing exactly, but also for authorities to be able to check what the individual doctor, nurse, etc. is doing, and the capabilities of organizations to actually fulfill needs. So there's a lot of change happening.
Very good. All right, thank you, Dave. Very good. Okay, Sheila, do you want to sign us out then?
Yep. Thank you again so much, Stu, Dave, Steve, for this very insightful webinar. And to everyone, thank you so much. Maraming salamat, Sheshe. Would like to invite you, though, again, to please join us on our next 2021 Health and Wellness Will Be Different webinar series, which is on October 21, 2020. Our topic would be Rethinking New Life Builders, Aging Asia, and Life After COVID. The fastest growing population in all Asian countries are the over 60s. Some call it aging populations. We call it new life builders. Life expectancy in countries like Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan is among the longest in the world. Countries like China and Thailand have some of the fastest aging populations. India, already over 100 million people are over 60. And more of these people are staying healthier, living longer, working longer, buying and spending longer. When it comes to healthy life expectancy, Japan might be the top. 60% of Japanese are willing to work until 70 years old, and 26% wants to work forever, which is good news for the country where labors are decreasing. But we should be smarter by learning how to work hard rather than long, right, Steve? So
very good.
Have Mr. Aki Kubu as our speaker, and he will be joined by Dave and Steve on October 21. So again, we will just have to say bye for now. And thank you so much for joining us. And I'd like to see you again on October 21. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
See you again.
Thank you, Stu. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Steve. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Stu.
Take care, everyone. Bye.